Okay, recording. So, showing up, just beginning of Thanksgiving break time. I wanted to post the criteria for the project in case anybody wanted to do some work on it over Thanksgiving break, or at least come up with an idea for it. I will give, we have 2 weeks when we come back from Thanksgiving, and the second one of those will be just time to work on things, project or labs you're finishing up, what have you. So there are most sort of 2 more labs the week we get back, and the following week, no labs, just time to work and catch up or work on the project. So let's see what the project involves. And then it will be due at the end of that week, that Friday, December 10th, at just before midnight. Okay. So there should be some subject to the app that it's, you know, it's about something, or it's a game, or it's a calculator, or it displays information, or something related to some theme, not just I click the button, give me credit. So there should be some theme, subject, scenario, what have you. There should be some, I'm just going to call it a screen, that is serves like a menu that leads to at least 2 other screens. So one way to do that, we did about 2 weeks ago. We had this bottom navigation type of app, and so it sort of gave you this screen, and then down at the bottom you clicked on certain icons, and they took you to other places, and then in those screens there was some code that did something. So you should have at least 2 of those. I'm going to show a different way to do that. The bottom navigation is, if you're working on a laptop, fine, but I'm not sure the sort of Gradle fix I have for an empty activity, I'm not sure that works for a bottom navigation activity. And so I'm going to give you 2 ways to do that. If you like the bottom navigation and you're working on a laptop, fine. If you're working in the labs, you may need to opt for the choice I'm giving you today. And if I come up with a solution to the bottom navigation, then good and fine, and I'll let you know. And if I don't, then I'll have to make one of the labs droppable. I'll drop one lab, and if you've done that lab but don't have some other lab, then fine. And if you can't do that lab, then that'll be your drop lab. Okay, but that remains to be seen. That's if I come up with some fix to the Gradle that makes the bottom navigation work, then that will still be required. So you should not give up on it just yet. But I want to allow people who are only working with the lab computers to be able to finish labs. So that will determine if that lab is ultimately required, and if it will be sort of fair game for the 3rd exam or not. So again, some theme, some kind of menu screen and 2 other screens can be what I teach today, can be not bottom navigation. There should be some data that you access. So it might be JSON, XML, or CSV, or other delimited file that you have to parse. Or it's possible it could be like if you have, I don't know, a product or characters or movies or whatever, and they have descriptions in files, that's possible to satisfy the text requirement if there are sort of multiple text things. So either you have one text file that you must do some parsing on, and JSON is fairly automated, but it's still parsing. Or if you're just reading simple text files, then there should be many of them. So a description of each product on its own little file, or what have you. Okay. what else should there be? There should be something where you use the web. So you should have to access the web. You get some, either have some data out on the web and use Volley. Maybe you're going to an API or getting an image off the web. It's easier, but you can go to YouTube like we did in certain labs. Okay. Then you have to have a spinner and a button somewhere. You're effectively having two screens, so somewhere on one of the two screens you should have a spinner and a button. And then you must have two other sort of visual widgets for the user to interact with. Edit text, checkbox, radio button, seek bar. We did calendar view. You could do something we didn't do. I think there's something for like giving things star ratings. So any of those options. So you should have at least one spinner, at least one button, and at least two other type of widgets. And two radio buttons doesn't count. I mean, when I say radio button, it's like the radio buttons in a radio group. Or, and then they have to do something. So you get the input from the user and you do something with it. So these are things that can be seen on the interface. I want there to be one thing that is sort of behind the scenes. That could be a sensor, that could be a media player, that could be a timer. And if you've come up with some theme and none of this stuff seems to fit, you can always put a media player, giving your app some little sound effect, like it starts up, or they click some button and they'll play a little bit of music and do whatever else is meaningful. So if timer or sensor works into what you're doing, great. If not, opt for the media player. That can always be easily worked in. There's all sorts of, you Google, sound effects or something like that. And there should be some little bit of logic, some calculation you do, some game logic, some little bit more involved parsing. Maybe you have to split something up. There should be some noticeable logic besides pure get something off of the screen, put something on the screen. There should be some little calculation involved, and then something with a shared preference. So you should be remembering something that the user did for the next time. Now, and that's it. So I will give each of these sort of categories, assign them a few points, no more than 10, but 4 to 10 points or something sort of, per thing, whatever I can make add up to 100. And if you leave it blank, you're going to lose those points. If you do it and do it well, you'll get all those points. If you do it sort of just barely, there it is, maybe you'll get, I don't know, 3 or 4 points or something like that. If something's not working, but you want at least partial credit for it, then like as on a test or something, comment it out. I don't just run them, I look at them, and so if I see, something went wrong with the seek bar, but they have one, I'll give you, some of those widget points. If you've been thinking about some project that you wanted to do and it just doesn't sort of fit my sort of scheme here, you can work with me and we'll come up with a new scheme if you have an interesting project. So I had a student in the past who was very much into like text to speech and speech to text, and he wanted to incorporate that. It didn't quite fit all my categories here, but we worked something out. So if what you have in mind is going beyond things we did, but doesn't match up with this, then just let me know and we can work something out. Try to keep it sort of straightforward and easy checklist so that you can know if you're doing what I want you to do. But if you want to do something and what I want you to do is not matching up, we can come to terms. Okay, so that is the project. You will have time to work on it or labs or what have you that last week. It's due late that Friday of that last week. And I think our test is on Thursday. Here's the portal, final exam schedule. We meet Tuesday, Thursday at 3:30. So here we are on Thursday at 4. So we have one of the last finals, not quite the last one, but one of the last ones at 4 o'clock on Thursday the 16th. Okay, so any questions about project? So you have time to think about it over break, what you might want to do. You'll have time to work on it that last week in class. But if you know you have some other big thing coming up and you want to work, finish it over break, that's fine. I don't care. Any questions? Okay. So now this, I'm going to do this sort of app that has multiple activities. So I have some pictures of things that happen, and then I'm going to put together one of these files, and then you will add to it for the lab. So if you make a normal sort of empty activity, hello world, and if you come up here and you right click, and we've done this when we've added a class, but this time we're adding an activity. So right click, new activity, empty activity. And that gives you two things. I've done it now twice, but it gives you a Kotlin file for your activity and a layout XML for your activity. It also does something to the AndroidManifest. It also announces a new activity in the AndroidManifest. And so that is the last one. So it added the activity, it gave me the name of the activity, but then I had to come and add this parent thing. And I'll show you, I want to be able to have a back button that goes back to the menu, back to the main activity, which will sort of serve for me as a menu. And for that simple, for a simple back property to work, I need to announce that this activity has a parent, and it's the main activity. So by right-clicking and saying, give me a new activity, I got this activity tag, but then I added an attribute to the activity tag. So let me download this and piece together. So I'll have to go through some of those things because I want to piece this thing together. So I have at this stage, not that. I have two open. Yes. So at this stage, I did the 30, 30, 30 because I'm working in the lab, and I replaced my dependencies, and I have a working hello world lab. Okay. Now I want to right click over here, and I'm going to add a new activity, empty activity. And I'm going to call it, I call it a different thing yesterday, but I'll call it SLDP R, it's another one of those depreciation examples, and SL is straight line. I'm going to say finish. And that created a KT here. And an activity SL DPR here. And in the AndroidManifest, it made an activity tag. And I'm going to do another one because I'm going to have two types. I'm going to have two types of depreciation. You're going to add a third empty activity, and this one's going to be double declining depreciation. And again, something in Kotlin, something here in layout XML, and again, something in manifest. And I have things open for now. Let me close a bunch and open as I need. Okay. So I'm going to start from the code I provided, start constructing this project here. Okay. So let's look at the layouts. I'm going to look at the main activity one first. Open that with Notepad++. And here I'm going to do one thing to watch is that there's a context here in the XML, and main activity it names, and so I don't have to worry about any problem of names because, and for this one, because main activity is main activity, and I'm going to paste that over here in code. And so now I have main activity, and it just has two buttons, one to take me to straight line, one to take me to double decline. So that was activity main. Now I'm going to open up the other two. Now these have a context that depends on how I name things. And so what I'm going to do is copy, I'm going to not copy the constraint layout at the top or the bottom, but I'm going to copy the insides. So usually in the XML, I'm usually copying the whole thing, but this time I'm just going to copy the interior part to avoid this context thing, because that will throw me off. And then I'm going to go over to straight line depreciation here and in code, and not replace the whole thing, but fill in the middle. Okay. And then I'll do the same thing for the double declining. Not do the constraint layout tag, just before and after. Everything in the middle, but not the two open and closed constraint layout tags. And from here to double declining and code and paste that in. And what this guy has, they both look the same. There's a text view that says the initial value. Then there's an edit text for entering the initial value, a text view saying salvage value, an edit text for the salvage value, a text view saying lifetime, an edit text for the lifetime, a button that says generate the schedule, and then a text view for displaying the schedule. And they both look like that. The calculations are different, but the interior is pretty much the same. Okay, so that was the XML. Let me now look at the Kotlin code. Start with main activity. here is on create. I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to have two buttons, and I'm going to have those buttons take me to new activities. So I'm just grabbing here this interior. I probably could grab the whole thing except the package because I named it something different, but I'm grabbing the interior of on create. And that was here, main activity, and I'm pasting in the interior of the on create. I didn't copy, because I didn't copy everything, I didn't copy the imports, and so it doesn't know what I mean by button until I say Alt-Enter. Doesn't know what I mean by intent, so I say Alt-Enter. Now I name things differently. So previously I'd called it straight line DPR, but now I'm calling it SLDPR. So that needs to be changed. This should match the class SLDPR. That's referring to this class up here. And even though it's a Kotlin class, this says Java. And then I didn't call it double declining. I called it DD underscore depreciation, DPR. Okay. So this is the main activity code. Go to the interface and find a button. Go to the interface, find a button. When I click the first button, set up an intent. It goes to the depreciation class, and then start that activity. Double declining is the same. Set up just a different, go to a different class and start up that activity. Okay. What else do I need to do? I need the other Kotlins. So here, I think I'll copy everything but the package. Let's try that. So this was the straight line. Over here, I called it SL, everything but the package. It's yelling at me at least in one place. And that is because I named the layout differently than I did before. So before I named it activity straight underscore line underscore depression. Here I named it SL. So now that's updated. And that seems to be fine. We'll come back. Okay. And what else do I need? I need the double depreciation. So I'm going to copy everything but the package. Paste in everything but the package. And then there's that one place where I go to the layout, and I don't have the same layout name that I had before. So it's activity DD depression. All right. Now I'm going to start it and see how far we get. Something's going to fail, and then I'm going to fix it. So let me just save just in case and stop hello world and start this newer thing. And it's yelling at me, it doesn't like classes. Okay with it a minute ago, and now it doesn't like it. Let me do it. Clean. should be SLDPR. Why doesn't it like that? Why are you not liking this? Let me look at the AndroidManifest. This guy's a little funky here because he doesn't have a closed activity. Well, that's good. I'm going to try a refactor. All right, I'm sorry about this. I'm wondering if I have MainActivity doesn't have .kt and these other two have .kt. I'm wondering if they have two extensions or something. Being recognized as I call this one demo 1123B. They're all just KTs. Oh, I know what I'm missing. I know what I'm missing. Sorry. This, the name of the class is not matching. All right. And the name of the class is not matching. So the name of the file and the name of the class should match. Let's try it again. here's, I renamed this and forgot to change. All right. So now I have the main activity is these buttons. Straight line depression takes me to the straight line depression thing. The back button won't work at this stage. So that's what I'm going to fix next. Okay. So let's review what I added new activity, empty activity. And that gave me a file here and a file here. I added the code I wanted to be on the whatever widgets I wanted on the XML. I have code here, but I had some naming issues that the name of this class, I should have just copied the interior stuff like I did on the other, but I got to copy. So this name should match this name, should match this name. So the name of the activity, the name of the class within the activity, and the button going over to the class, those all have to match. And I had 2 of the 3, but not all, and I think I have it right now. My back button doesn't work. Here is the code that tries to make my back button work in the DDD EPR now, double declining rate. Here's the code that tries to make the back button work. Here's the action bar saying it's double declining depreciation. And here's the button that says I should be able to go home. But the problem is that it's in the AndroidManifest, I have to announce that MainActivity is the parent of the other 2. That's what I'm missing here. This also has to match. So, and that's another one of those has to match things. So this name and this name. The name of the file, the name of the class, the class that the intent goes over to, and the name of the activity in the AndroidManifest all must match. And that's what I had wrong. I was missing 1 or more. But now here I need to announce the parent. So Android parent, activity name, and main activity is going to be the parent of the double declining. It's also going to be the parent of the straight line. Save that, and now the back should work. So I'm going to straight line, and I'm going back. Going to double declining, and I'm going back. In straight line, I can do this calculation. So here's the depreciation schedule for if the initial value was 40,000, the salvage was 2,000, and yeah, and the lifetime was 7 years. If I change it to 50,000, 3,000, and 8 years for the lifetime and generate the schedule, that's fine. But now I'm going to go back from straight line to double declining, and it remembered those values. So I'm going to be doing that with shared preferences. So give you some review on shared preferences and sort of it's shared preference is a way I can get the activities to sort of talk to each other, to share some information. Okay, so let's look at one of these. Okay, so I've looked at main activity. Main activity is just my menu, and it's a button. I make an intent and I start the activity for the intent. We did something like that when we went to YouTube, except now we've made the new thing, whereas YouTube was already made and we just went to it. Now we're making the thing that we're going to is the thing, a separate thing that we've made. Okay. So that is main activity. Let's look at straight line depreciation. Okay. I'm scrolling down to the bottom to show you that I have things outside of onCreate. I decided to have an onResume, and I decided to write some code for clearing out the depreciation schedule, and I put that outside of onCreate. So having stuff outside of onCreate makes some decisions for me. Okay. I want to be able to access the shared preferences in onCreate and in onResume. So I want the shared preference to be global, but I cannot initialize it here, but I can declare it here. So this is me declaring the shared preference globally or at the class level. But I started off as null because I can't initialize it. And it's var because it's going to change. It's going to change from null to something that's not null. I have some calculator things here, initial, salvage, and life. And just to, I don't really need them to be global. It doesn't really help me for them to be global. But I want to show you that if you have a simple global variable, it's easy to declare and initialize. So things that involve your interface or your app in general are difficult to work with globally because they want to be initialized and can't be initialized. Simple variables can easily be assigned a value that you're just going to toss away later on. I also worked with the edit texts, and I'm going to work with them in onCreate, and I'm also going to work with them in onResume and in the clearing method that I wrote at the bottom. So, no, well, they call it. They don't actually have any. They don't have any role in the actual method, so I take it back. But I'm going to use this in the onResume. So I decided to make them global since I want them accessible outside of onCreate. And it didn't want me to say null, but it wanted me to say that it was an edit text. I had to use var because later I'm going to initialize it later, so it's going to change. So I needed var, not val. And then I needed this word late init. So we played that game before, like with the sensors. Okay. So this allows me to make these edit texts global, work with them outside of onCreate, but I can't initialize them until I'm inside onCreate. So I use the word late init. Okay. So we're in onCreate finally. Here's my action bar. That's the top. That's this top thing. This is the double declining rate one, but you give it a title and you allow it to go back. Give it a title, allow it to go back. I connect to the schedule button and the TV schedule. These are sort of quasi-independent things, so I can call button schedule in two different things. Like this is an ID, and an ID should be unique, but I can have a button schedule in this class in the straight line depreciation, and I can have a button schedule over here as well. I don't have to give them, they have different realms, and so those IDs are allowed to be the same. Usually it would complain if you gave two things the same ID, but they belong to different activities, and that was okay. So here I'm connecting to the button and to the schedule. Here I'm initializing the edit text. I did it in two different ways. Don't ask me why. One time, as I said, as edit text, and the other time I put edit text here. I'm adding a listener, a text change listener for all my edit text. This is the schedule clearing function that I have at the bottom. So they all call the same, that's not it. This is it. They all call that same function. So I don't have to write that function 3 times over for every edit text. I just write it once. Okay, so that was here. Gave them all the same listener. So all the edit texts have the same listener. That's what I set up here. That code's down at the bottom. Here's my shared preference, setting up my shared preference. The caller, I should say declare the shared preference in the editor. The shared preference was declared globally, so there's no val or var here because that was up, the val was up, or the var was up above. But here I am initializing it, and I'm setting up the editor. I'm not going to do any writing in, I'm not going to do any putting, I'm not going to do any writing where I use the editor. In the resume, I may do some reading, but I won't do any writing, so I don't need the editor outside of onCreate. So that's why it's declared just here in onCreate. I'm getting my initial salvage and life value from my shared preference. So I'm going to my shared preference and getting a float called initial, getting a float called salvage, getting an int called life. Here are my default values. So if I don't have anything remembered from a previous running, this will be, I'll use 40,000, 2007. So the first time I ran it, you saw that those were the values that popped up. They were the default values. Once I chose 50,000 and 3,008 years, then I'm reading, then I have actual, I often refer to them as cookies. I have cookies, I have shared preferences, and I will take in the actual values rather than the defaults. You need this just because it's this weird declared up here and then used down here, and might not have satisfactorily declared it or something like that. It wants that exclamation point to sort of, it may not exist. If it exists, then do it. If it doesn't exist, then don't do it. Okay, it just likes to be careful in that way. Okay. I got the things from the shared preferences. Now I'm putting them into the edit texts. And now here I am, here's my button click handler, and I'm getting information from the page. So the user might have changed what's in the file. So now I'm getting from the user what they entered. This was me getting what the user did before and putting it in the box. But then the user has the choice, because they're edit text, to further edit the numbers. And here's me bringing them back in so that I can do my calculation. Here's my calculation and getting my schedule together. So the depreciation is the initial minus the salvage divided by life. Value is equal to initial. And then I go through a loop from 1 to life. And I keep subtracting the same amount in straight line depreciation, and I'm displaying the schedule in TV schedule. I am putting my shared preferences. I'm remembering the values that they just entered, and then I'm using for future purposes in case they want me to do the same calculation again, maybe in double declining. I have to apply shared preference. Remember, that's like a commit in a database. It doesn't happen if you don't do it. I know all too well because yesterday I forgot to do it. wondered why my shared preferences weren't working, and because I didn't apply. And I have all this in a try because this casting of variables might not work. It's got to be a float, and an int. That could fail. And so I have a toast here saying there must be some error with the data. I decided to have a resume. And when I resume, I'm grabbing my values from the shared preferences and putting them into the edit text again. Here's my shared schedule clearing code. All the edit text, call this schedule clear function. A text watcher wants 3, the before, the after, and the during. I didn't do anything for before or after, but in the during, I have set the text to just a bunch of dashes to clear out any previous schedule. If they change the data, I want to clear out the schedule. Double declining is all the same, except that the calculation is a little bit different. Everything else was the same. It's basically a copy. And what do you have to do? Basically the same, except a slightly different calculation. Same as you did before with the sum of the digits calculation that you did for the bottom navigation. This is just an alternative to that bottom navigation. But I've also added the shared preference because that's good practice. Okay, so you're going to add a new activity for the sum of the year's digit. So I give you something, you're going to add an activity to it. You're going to have a button that leads you to your new activity. You should be able to move back, so make the main activity the parent of the new activity. Fill the layout with the usual stuff so they can enter an initial salvage value and lifetime, and then write a depreciation schedule based on the sum of the year digits. If you've done the bottom navigation lab, it's the same calculation. And you're remembering things in shared preferences so that you can remember the values from times before. Any questions on the lab? Nothing. I'm going to stop recording.